There's a sound a diesel engine makes when it's chewing through money you don't have anymore. A low growl, then a screech when the teeth hit rock. I've heard that sound my whole working life, 31 years pouring foundations and grading roads for other people's dreams. I just never expected to hear it on my own land. It was a Monday morning in late April. I was about to start the tractor and knock back some cedar on the east 5 acres, the same 5 acres where Ruth used to plant her bluebonnets every spring before the cancer took her back in 2019. I still keep that patch mowed the way she liked it. When I came up over the rise, I didn't see the meadow. I saw a 20-ton excavator sitting almost exactly where I figured my line ran.
It had already opened a rectangular gash in the ground, maybe 30 feet long. Limestone spoil and dark topsoil were piled up right on top of what was left of Ruth's flowers. 6 guys were laying rebar, spraying survey paint, moving like they had every right to be there. I'm Walt, 52 years old. I've built bridges that carry 18-wheelers and highways that carry 100,000 cars a day. And there is nothing about a construction site I don't understand at a glance. I knew where my dirt stopped, and somebody was digging a hole big enough to bury a school bus about 15 feet on the wrong side of it. I didn't yell. I shut off the tractor, took a pull from my thermos, and let myself get good and calm before I walked down there, because this wasn't the first time Chase had tested that fence line. 6 weeks earlier, it had been a surveyor's stake, driven in 8 feet onto my side. A month before that, brush cleared past the old stone wall while I was away. Small stuff, the kind of thing you let go twice.
This wasn't 8 feet of dirt anymore. And for a second, standing there, I felt something under the anger I didn't expect, something closer to tired. I'm 52. My knees aren't what they were. Ruth used to handle the arguing. I handled the building. I didn't know yet if I had the stomach for a fight like this one, or if I was about to spend the next year of my life proving a point to a man half my age with 3 times my money. I started walking down the slope anyway, and somewhere behind me I heard Brianne's voice carry across the yard, bright and performative. "And here's the excavation starting, you guys. I am so excited." Filming for her followers. I filed that away. Chase moved in about 2 years back. Wealth management consultant. From what I can tell, that means he spends his day on video calls telling other people how to invest money they don't have yet. I'll say this for him, because it's true and it matters. He wasn't stupid, and he wasn't some cartoon rich kid who'd never worked. He'd built his own firm from nothing after getting laid off in his late 20s. I knew that because he'd mentioned it once, almost defensively, like he was used to people assuming he'd been handed everything. He genuinely believed, I think, that the fence line was fuzzy, not because he'd checked, because believing it was fuzzy was convenient, and Chase had a talent for believing convenient things all the way down. The first time we really talked, he leaned over my fence with a glass of wine and asked if I'd sell him the back corner of my lot. "It's just scrub, Walt. You're not using it. I want an infinity pool, the kind that spills off into the view." "The brush is for the deer, Chase, and it's not for sale." That tight little smile. "Let's be neighbors about it. My lawyer mentioned something about an implied easement, given how the ridge slopes. There's nothing implied about a fence line, Chase." After that, things got quieter but colder. He stopped waving from his truck. Once, at a neighborhood association meeting, he made a comment about some of the older properties around here not being put to their highest use, and a couple of the newer folks laughed along. I didn't say anything. I just remembered it. So when I walked down to that excavator, I already knew what kind of conversation I was walking into. "Walt, hey, great day, right? We finally broke ground." Chase had a hard hat on that had clearly never touched dust.
"Chase, you're 15 feet over the line. You're dumping spoils on my land." "We had a private survey done," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Turns out the old fence was misplaced by whoever owned your place before you. My guys checked it. We're fine." "I'd like to see that survey." "It's at the office." He glanced back at the concrete trucks idling in his driveway, and for just a second I saw something under the confidence. Not guilt, exactly. More like the look of a man who's already spent more than he can undo and is choosing not to do the math on it. "We're knee-deep in shotcrete prep. Tell you what, once it's done, you can swim on Sundays. On the house." He patted my shoulder. "Sunday swims. Real generous, Chase." I walked back up the hill. I didn't have a plan yet. I had a phone number for the county clerk's office and a growing, uncomfortable suspicion that Chase had lawyers on retainer and I had a stainless steel thermos. I didn't go home and have a beer. I drove to the county seat, expecting to be back by lunch. I was wrong about that. The clerk told me land records before 1980 were stored off-site in an annex, and that I'd need to submit a request slip and come back the next day. I came back the next day. Boxes stacked by year, but not always in order, a part-time clerk who could only pull 5 boxes per visit for preservation reasons. It took 3 trips over 5 days. Somewhere around the second trip, sitting alone in that unair-conditioned warehouse with sweat down my back and nothing to show for 6 hours but a water-damaged plat filed under the wrong parcel number, I seriously asked myself whether I should just let it go. Chase would win a war of attrition without even trying. He could throw a paralegal at this for a year and never miss a payment on that pool. I'm one man with a bad knee and a part-time clerk who closes at 4. There's no shame, I told myself, in a man my age deciding a piece of scrub brush isn't worth what it'd cost him. Then I thought about Ruth's bluebonnets under a pile of limestone spoil, and I went back the next morning anyway. On the third trip, an older clerk named Dolores took pity on me and dug up the original 1890 land grant herself, still in the tube it had shipped in decades earlier. The 1974 plat showed a stonemason's wall running along the ridge, marking the boundary. 40 years of cedar and silt had buried most of it, but the county still recognized it as the legal line, not the fence, not whatever private survey Chase was waving around. I checked the tax rolls next, my acreage, his acreage, and when I laid the county's plat over the newest satellite image, it wasn't close. The entire deep end of that pool sat on my side. Then I found the part that stopped me cold. A pool that size needs a serious water supply. Chase had filed a permit for a new high-capacity line, and the only practical route ran straight through my land. To get that permit approved fast, you need a signed neighbor agreement. Chase had one on file. My signature, notarized, dated 3 months back. I never signed anything. I was 200 miles away that whole week, helping my daughter move a couch. I sat with that document a long time, and underneath the anger, there was something else again. A small, cold worry that I might be in over my head. A man who'd forge a signature to save himself a permit delay wasn't going to fold over an iron pin in the dirt. I didn't know yet what I was going to do about that, but I knew this had stopped being a fence line disagreement, and that whatever it was now, a lawyer or the county needed to be the one to say so, not me sitting in a records annex with dust on my hands.
I called Earl the next morning. Earl's surveyed half this county over 40 years, and he doesn't believe in flexible lines. He showed up at 7 with a tripod that looked like it survived a war, chewed on a piece of hay while he set up, and didn't say much until he'd run the numbers twice. "You got a problem here, Walt." He pointed to his data collector. "By my measurements, the pool structure sits roughly 16 feet onto your side of the 1974 boundary line. That's a hard number." He walked into the brush, kicked away some dirt, and there it was, the original iron pin from 74, red paint mostly worn off. He photographed it, logged the coordinates, and didn't speculate about anything he hadn't measured himself. While Earl set up his second shot, one of Chase's crew walked over on his break and said, low enough that his boss wouldn't hear, "For what it's worth, man, a couple of us told the foreman this looked off." He didn't give his name. I remembered his face anyway. "Earl, I need a certified report, every coordinate, notarized, by 5 this evening." "You suing him?" "No." Down the hill, the concrete trucks were rotating. Once that shotcrete set, it wasn't a disagreement anymore. It was permanent, sitting on my dirt. Earl looked at me like I'd lost the thread. Why let a man finish building on your land? Truth was, I still wasn't all the way sure of the answer myself. Part of it was strategy. Part of it, if I'm honest, was that I needed a few more days to decide whether I actually had it in me to see this through, or whether I was just too tired, too outgunned, and too far past the age for this kind of fight. I didn't say any of that to Earl. I just watched the trucks and thought about how many days it usually takes shotcrete to cure. 8, maybe 10 if the weather held. I had about that much long to be ready, or to decide I wasn't going to be. I didn't do anything for 3 days. Then on the 4th day, Chase did something for me. A courier showed up at my gate with an envelope from a law firm in Austin, the kind with 3 names on the letterhead, and none of them cheap. Inside was a cease and desist, claiming that Earl and I had trespassed onto Chase's property while conducting an unauthorized survey, and that if it happened again, Chase would seek a restraining order. I read it twice, standing in my own driveway. My hands weren't quite steady, and it took me a minute to figure out why. Not fear, exactly, more like the ground moving under something I'd thought was solid. If a judge signed off on a restraining order before I ever got my evidence in front of the county, I'd be the one locked off my own land while a stolen swimming pool kept filling with water. I called Sarah. She read it over the phone and told me flatly that it was mostly noise. Earl had surveyed from public right-of-way and my own side of the boundary the whole time, and we had the coordinates to prove it. Mostly noise still costs money, though. She quoted me a retainer to answer it formally, a number that made me do quiet math in my head about what a contractor's retirement account actually looks like after 31 years of other people's projects and none of my own. I paid it. I didn't love paying it. 2 days after that, I called the code enforcement office to ask about getting an inspector out once the pool went live, and got a different answer than I expected. The man on the phone told me they couldn't schedule anything in advance without a judge's order or a formal complaint already filed and reviewed, which could take weeks, maybe longer, and the pool would be finished and full long before that clock ran out. I hung up, feeling like I'd lost the piece of ground I didn't know I was standing on. Down the hill, none of that noise touched Chase at all. The concrete trucks kept coming, the queen palms went in. And on Tuesday, a woman from 2 properties over, Carol Ann Whitcomb, who'd brought me a casserole the week Ruth died and hadn't spoken 10 words to me since, stopped her car at the end of my drive to tell me, not unkindly, that folks in the neighborhood group were saying I was the one causing trouble over some brush nobody used. She wasn't cruel about it. She just believed it, and that stung worse than if she'd been cruel. I sat on the porch that night longer than usual, coffee gone cold, wondering if I'd already lost more than I'd gained, money spent, a neighbor's good opinion spent, and still no guarantee anybody official would show up when it mattered. Ruth would have had something sharp to say about feeling sorry for myself. I didn't have her voice anymore, just the memory of it, so I sat with the quiet instead. On the 6th day, I drove to the county building one more time, not to ask for a favor this time, just to lay everything on the counter. Earl's report, the forged permit, my daughter's moving receipts proving I was 200 miles away the week of that signature. A clerk named Dave looked through all of it slower than I expected, then told me something I hadn't planned for. He couldn't promise to be there Saturday. He could put in for it. It would depend on staffing and on his supervisor signing off same day. I left his office with no guarantee of anything, just a phone number and 8 days left before the shotcrete cured all the way through. The setbacks kept coming faster than I could clear them. Chase's lawyers filed a formal complaint of their own with the county, not against the pool, against me, alleging my cattle fence encroached 3 feet onto his side near the old stone wall. It wasn't true, and Earl proved it wasn't true in about 20 minutes with his equipment, but it cost me another day answering paperwork instead of building my own case, and it told me something about how this was going to go. Chase wasn't going to sit still and lose quietly. He was going to make losing as expensive and as slow for me as he possibly could. Then came the phone call from my own homeowners association, informing me that a complaint had been filed about the height of my perimeter fence, 6 inches over the association limit, a fence that had stood at that exact height since before the association even existed. I knew where that complaint came from. I didn't have proof yet. I filed it away the way I'd learned to file things away.
By day 7, I was down to a little over $1,000 in the account I kept, separate for exactly this kind of thing. Most of it gone to Sarah's retainer, and a portion to the fence violation I paid rather than fight, because fighting it would have cost more than the fine itself. I sat at the kitchen table that night and did the math twice, and both times it came out the same. If Dave's supervisor said no, if the inspection didn't happen Saturday, I had no plan B that didn't involve a courtroom date 8 months out and a legal bill that would eat whatever was left of my savings before it was over. I called Earl and told him where things stood. He didn't say much. Earl never does, but he showed up the next morning anyway with his tripod unasked and told me he'd log the final measurements himself, certified and notarized, so that whatever happened with the county, I'd have something no judge could argue with later. "Doesn't fix Saturday," I said. "No," he said, "but it means Saturday isn't the only day that matters." I didn't feel as steady as I wanted to feel. I want to be honest about that, because I think it matters more than pretending I walked into that party with total confidence. I didn't. I walked into it with a folder of paperwork, a lawyer I was already worried I couldn't keep paying, and no promise from the one county official who could make any of it stick in public. Saturday came anyway, whether I was ready or not. 30-some cars lined the gravel road for what Chase called the Infinity Launch. Caterers, a DJ, Brianne on the pool deck in a white swimsuit narrating to a phone screen. I put on my work coveralls, clipped on my tool belt, and picked up the valve key I hadn't used in 11 years.
Earl met me at the fence line with his report sealed in plastic. Neither of us said much walking down. I still hadn't heard back from Dave. Chase saw us coming and peeled off from a cluster of men in golf shirts, that loose, confident walk of somebody 3 drinks into a party he already believes he's won. "Walt, Earl, perfect timing. Come have a—" He stopped himself when he clocked the tool belt and the valve key. "You're 16 feet onto my side of a boundary the county's had on record since 1974. And that water line was permitted on a signature I never signed." The noise thinned out around us in a ring, the way it does when a crowd senses something before it understands it. Somebody cut the bass. That's when Chase's attorney showed up at his elbow. I hadn't clocked him in the crowd until then. A younger man in a blazer who'd clearly been standing by for exactly this. "Mr. Kessler," he said to me, using my legal name like a weapon, "you're on notice regarding a cease and desist. Anything you do here tonight, we will use." For one long second, I felt the whole thing tilt. No confirmation from Dave. A lawyer standing 3 feet away telling me in front of 30 witnesses that I was about to make a legal mistake. A voice in my head that sounded a little like exhaustion and a little like good sense telling me to fold. Go home. Let Sarah handle it in a courtroom 8 months from now, the slow, expensive way. I thought about the bluebonnets instead. I turned the valve key over once in my hand. "Earl?" I said. Earl opened the report and read the number out loud, plain as a grocery list. "Pool structure sits 16 feet 2 inches onto Walt's recorded boundary. Certified and filed with the county this morning." Chase's face didn't hold the way it had in April. I walked to the shutoff, sitting a few feet onto my own side of the line, put the key to the housing, and turned it hard against the thread until it gave. The fill line groaned, then went hollow. 30 seconds later, the vanishing edge started to run dry, tile going bare under all that imported stone. "Walt, that's assault on my equipment. That's—" Chase started toward me and stopped hard at the strip of orange painting marking Earl had laid that afternoon. Headlights swung up the gravel road behind us. No siren, just a county vehicle pulling in slow, a second car behind it. Dave got out first, folder under his arm, a second inspector a step behind him. I hadn't heard back all week. He'd come anyway. "Stop work order," Dave said, loud enough to carry, peeling a red notice off his pad. "Unpermitted structure encroaching on the adjacent parcel. Site to be restored to prior condition within 30 days. Chase's lawyer opened his mouth to argue jurisdiction, permits, procedure. Dave held up the forged signature page next to my daughter's moving company receipts, side by side, and didn't say a single word back. He didn't have to. I watched 30 guests find reasons to be somewhere else, drinks left half full on a stone ledge that used to be Ruth's fence line. They tore it out with a jackhammer over the following week. $40,000 going into the ground the first time, another 20 coming back out, plus disposal. Sarah's restoration invoice went out 3 weeks later. First line, $15,000 for the Bluebonnet Meadow. Chase called about it once. Sarah called him back and mentioned, almost as an aside, that the felony forgery charge was still an open question, resting on how reasonable the next 30 days turned out to be. The check cleared before the month was out. By spring, the ground had gone green again. No pool, no palms shivering through a cold snap they were never built for, just bare dirt healing over, and here and there the first ragged blue pushing back up through it. I climbed down off the tractor one afternoon, slower than I used to,
picked the biggest bluebonnet in the patch and set it on the kitchen windowsill where Ruth used to sit with her coffee. I figured that was the end of it.
It wasn't. 6 weeks after the check cleared, I was loading feed into my truck at the co-op when Brianne pulled up next to me in a car that wasn't the one she'd had in April. Smaller, older, the kind of downgrade that happens after a house sale nobody wanted to make. She didn't get out right away. When she finally did, she looked at me across the truck bed for a good 10 seconds before she said anything. "I need to tell you something, and I don't need you to forgive him for it. I just need somebody besides me to know it." I waited. The first survey wasn't a mistake. Chase's architect drew the pool against the real line, the correct one, your line, back in February, before anybody ever broke ground. Chase told him to shift the plans 8 feet so he wouldn't have to redesign the deep end. He knew before the first shovel of dirt moved. The private survey he showed you in April, the one he said proved the fence was misplaced, he had that made afterward, to have something to wave at you if you asked. I didn't say anything for a while. Down at the far end of the co-op lot, somebody's dog was barking at nothing. Why are you telling me this now and not 6 months ago?
"Because 6 months ago, I still thought the house sale would fix it," she said. "It didn't fix anything. He's already talking to a broker about doing the same thing 2 counties over. Smaller lot, quieter neighbor. I figured somebody should know what he actually is before he tries it on somebody who doesn't have an Earl." She got back in her car before I could ask her anything else and pulled out of the lot without looking back. I stood there by my truck a long moment with a 50-pound bag of feed on my shoulder, thinking about 8 days of shotcrete curing, about a lawyer's retainer that had scared me more than I let on, about how close that Saturday had come to going a very different way if Dave's truck hadn't turned up that gravel road when it did. It hadn't been luck that saved me. It had been Earl showing up unasked, and Sarah answering her phone, and a county inspector who kept his word even when he never promised to. But it made me wonder how many other Walts were out there right now, standing on their own dirt, waiting on a call that might not come. So tell me, if you'd been in my boots that Saturday, with a lawyer telling you to stop and no confirmation the inspector was even coming, would you have turned that valve anyway? And if Chase really is looking at land 2 counties over right now, what do you think somebody ought to do about it? Leave it in the comments. I read every one.